Welcome back to the Power Breakfast Show. My name is Wahiga Mwaura. Time now for the paper review, taking a look at what is happening in the dailies. And of course, you can talk to us about some of the topics that we are discussing today. Talk to us on 22422. And you can also talk to us on our social media platforms at Citizen TV Kenya. And I will read your feedback throughout the course of this broadcast. And today I want to ask you, what are your expectations, or what is your expectation from the Supreme Court, even as they give their detailed judgment from about 10 a.m. today? What are your expectations? What are you hoping to hear from the 7-judge bench as they give their detailed judgment today? I'll be reading some of your feedback in just a bit. But for now, let's take a look at how the newspapers have profiled some of the activities from yesterday and today's expectations. We start with the front page of the Standard, which is Maraga Fury. And they have a small quote there at the bottom of the front page. If leaders are tired of having a strong and independent judiciary, they should call a referendum and abolish it altogether. A quote from the Chief Justice after he spoke yesterday together with some members of the Judicial Service Commission just outside the Supreme Court. And just a little editorial here where the paper states, a day to the release of the full judgment annulling President Uhuru Kenyatta's win and the filing of petitions questioning the integrity of three of his judges, CJ vows he will not be intimidated and that he will discharge his duties at the risk of his life. You should be seeing that up on the screen. Judiciary Fights Back is the title. All this being on the front page of the Standard. The key story is on page 6, and I'll just read a quick headline there. Chief Justice David Maraga has criticized what he termed as continued intimidation of the judiciary by politicians after the nullification of President Uhuru Kenyatta's win. The CJ spoke out against the backdrop of 3 petitions questioning his conduct and that of 2 other judges who are among the 4 who nullified the August 8th presidential election. And so that is how the Standard has chosen to cover what is obviously the biggest story in the country right now and what many are discussing in all corners of Kenya and even around the world as well. Let's take a look at, and so there you go, CJ furious over attacks on judiciary by leaders. That is page 6 of the Standard. Let's now take a look at what's happening in the Daily Nation, the front cover. Some similar word there, but of course a more extended headline. Maraga's rare fury in wake of protests is what we have on page 1 of the Daily Nation. Leave us alone, Chief Justice says, as he defends independence of the judiciary after widespread protests against the Supreme Court by Jubilee supporters who accuse judges of impropriety. And a little quote there by the Chief Justice: "We will not allow anybody to dictate to us how to discharge our mandate as given to us by the people of Kenya under the Constitution." And of course they cover this topic on page 2, 3, 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. And just to help us discuss a little bit about what is happening in the papers today, I'm joined by Sarah Kinyanjui, a lawyer. Welcome to the program, Sarah.
Thank you, Wahiga.
In addition, we also have Kimathi Mwiti, also a lawyer. Welcome to the program as well.
Thank you.
Let me start with you, Sarah. So much happening this season, so much since yesterday, but for now I want to hear from you. What are your expectations from the Supreme Court, even as we know that from 10 a.m. we know that they've stated that is when they'll give the detailed judgment?
Honestly, prior to the full judgment, it has been quite hard to legally define what the current challenges within the IEBC. And my expectations are that I'm hoping to see the full judgment that will explain the irregularities and the illegalities that happened in the previous election. That is 1. And 2, my expectations that are the CJ will give us recommendations on the way forward with the new IEBC.
Okay. And of course, we'll have to wait and see how that will pan out. Kimathi, same question to you. What are your expectations, even as Kenyans talk to us also on 22422 about their expectations?
Thank you, Wahiga, for having me here today. My first expectation is that the Supreme Court has an opportunity today to have a to give Kenyans a detailed judgment so as to put to an end a lot of the criticisms that have been put across against the court, and also to guide the IEBC in preparing for the next fall, the repeat presidential election.
Okay.
Secondly, we expect that the illegalities that were committed and the irregularities committed by the IEBC officials, I would expect that the Supreme Court will delve into more specific details, such as who committed such offenses, to what extent, and maybe even go ahead and recommend to the DPP that such persons be charged, so as to ensure that further elections and the integrity of further elections is guaranteed, and it is done strictly in accordance to the constitutional guidelines.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Sarah, there's a section of Kenyans that are expecting fireworks today. They're saying, you know, this thing could have far-reaching implications, but others are saying, nevertheless, that the verdict was already delivered, so not much new information will come out of this. What do you think? Should Kenyans be expecting, you know, a lot of new information out of this detailed judgment? Or could it be that the summarized judgment that were already given by the Supreme Court, already that was where the punch was, and what will come out today might not be as significant?
Honestly speaking, I'm expecting that heads will turn today, because finally someone will be held accountable for the illegalities that have happened in the previous election. And anyone who has actually been able to talk about this without having the full judgment is merely speculating on what might actually happen, because technically what are you relying on? Is it the propaganda that is going around? And unjustifiable sources cannot be valid sources to adequately interrogate what is going on in the IEBC. I think with the full reasoned judgment by Maraga, we will be able to chart our way forward as a country, and we will be able to hold people accountable. Prior to this, we might be lynching innocent civilians because of propaganda and playing politics with people's lives, and I think that is not the way to go as a nation.
Okay. Kimadi, I want to refer you to page 2 of the Daily Nation. We actually were seeing that headline on the screen. Maybe we can put it back on. We will not be cowed, Maraga tells court critics. Kimadi, I want to find out from you, how much pressure do you think the Supreme Court is right now, even as Kenyans eagerly await that detailed judgment from 10 o'clock, with everything that's been happening around the country? Honestly, you know, one could feel that the 7-judge bench and the judiciary as a whole is under immense pressure.
I don't think that the judiciary, or rather the Supreme Court, is under so much pressure that they cannot bear, because that is within the scope of their work. And they very well know that Article 159 of the Constitution guarantees that the judicial authority is derived from the people. So they are actually exercising the powers given to them by the people of Kenya. And it's only the courts that can exercise such powers. So that brings in the aspect of judicial independence, where the judiciary is not subject to control of any arm of government, be it the executive, be it legislature, or any other person or institution in this country. So as long as they just follow the Constitution, do what's required of them, I don't think why they should be worried or be under so much pressure with what is happening around the country in terms of the political implications.
Nevertheless, and Sarah can also come in on this, feel free to interrupt, they have been under a lot of pressure. In fact, there are those who feel that a section of this country or a section of leaders have gone beyond criticizing the judiciary and are now even attempting to breach its independence, giving threats that we'll deal with you later, especially on the Jubilee side. Where would you say the limit is between criticizing the judiciary and breaching its independence? And have we crossed that limit? Maybe I'll start with you, Kimathi.
Okay, first of all, there are fair comments which can be agreeable, maybe to criticize not personalities, but to criticize the content of any ruling and judgment, which is the right of every Kenyan. But when such criticisms or such comments go to attack the individual personalities of the judges, or to threaten that certain consequences will have to follow after they make certain decisions, I think now that is trying to interfere with the independence of the judiciary, and also having that being done by political leaders, and especially people we trust to take control of this country, who exercise executive authority in the maybe someone like the president and the deputy president, maybe the majority leader in the past has been on record for having leveled serious allegations against the judiciary, calling them criminals, and that's very uncalled for, and that's not what the Kenyan people wanted when they passed this constitution. So I think there has to be that line, But at the end of the day, it just depends on the integrity of the very people we have in office. People of integrity cannot go to such extents of threatening judicial officers, because they're the same people who may appear before these very courts that they are criticizing in very cruel terms.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would actually want to disagree with my fellow counsel here for a bit, because first of all, an independent, before you get to the judiciary as an institution and its independence, you cannot quite vouch for the individual himself. And the petition that is being sent to the Judicial Service Commission is trying to bring that issue into perspective. Let me take us back a bit. In the Philip Tunoi saga, it was the suspicious circumstances that came in play that questioned his credibility as a Supreme Court judge, and that is what led to his removal as one of the Supreme Court judges.
Okay.
I say that it is also very important to have the same judges, Philip Lineola and Mwilu, go under the same light, because they are allowed to be scrutinized by the public. It's a counter narrative for our Chief Justice Maraga to stop the public from being able to scrutinize the judiciary, because the same way the Constitution provides for the independence of the judiciary, it also provides for a system of checks and balances on the same judiciary. And if we do not check on the judiciary, then we are trying to imply that the same judiciary is above the confines of the law, and that is very wrong. Individual judges should be accountable for certain instances that may somewhat look like suspicious circumstances, and it is very wrong for the Chief Justice, as the chair of the Judicial Service Commission, to come out and state that we should not be able to give the public and various people in the public domain an opportunity to do this and scrutinize these judges on some of the suspicious circumstances that might actually be raised.
What some are feeling, however, is suspicious, Sarah, just to see if I can get us to move this discussion along, is the timing with which the petition against those two judges have been brought just a few hours before the detailed Supreme Court judgment. Some feel that it is an attempt to intimidate the bench before they release their detailed judgment. How would you respond to that?
Honestly, Waigwa, let me state that the particular contents of the report to the Judicial Service Commission are directly affecting the state of the nation as it is. I wouldn't think of any other circumstance that would actually be better, and any other timing that would be better fit to actually adjudge and decide on these matters than this particular instance. Because if at all these two judges are held to be culpable, they should also face the full effect of the law.
Okay. I'll come back to you on that. I want to refer us to page 3 of the Daily Nation, and the headline reads as follows. Hopefully, and it's an editorial, I believe, by Mutuma Matthew, hopefully judgment will pacify voters and halt march to uncharted territory. Kimathi, let me come back to you. Is it possible that the judgment will not only answer the legal questions that we all have, but also solve the political divide that we find ourselves in? Can a judgment actually do that?
I think what the judgment today will primarily do is to stamp the authority of the court and the rule of law.
Okay. Because
most importantly, what the Chief Justice said yesterday, he spoke as the chairman of the Judicial Service Commission. The Constitution stipulates that the Judicial Service Commission has the function of ensuring accountability in the judiciary, whatever my learned counsel here is saying. So, in as much as the CJ may want to look into the accountability of judiciary, the same Judicial Service Commission has their function is to ensure that the independence of the judiciary is protected. So when the Chief Justice comes out to protect the independence of the judiciary, with so much authority, it does not mean he's trying to limit the scrutiny, or rather the accountability petitions that have been leveled against the two Supreme Court judges. And the judgment today may not really solve the political crisis that we have in this country, because it's not the work of the law to solve political crisis. But what it's going to do, it is going to really make a clear distinction on what is prohibited in the law and what the law says. So I think as an indirect effect, it might really influence what the political environment in this country will be regulated in future, and especially it will really help in ensuring that electoral justice in this country is guaranteed, because in the past we've had elections and after elections which have been contested, especially the presidential elections from the 2007 elections. We've never known the truth of what happened that year. 2013 also was clouded in a whole array of inconsistencies and allegations after allegations. And whatever the Angaza Empowerment NGO that filed the petition against Justice Lenaola,
Derek Ngumu
and Mwilu.
Go ahead. Yeah, the Angaza led by Derek Ngumu. He's the one who actually took those two petitions. Go ahead.
Derek Ngumu.
Yeah.
Whatever is detailed in those petitions is not far from maybe political rumors. And if at all it is evidence, there are allegations which have any evidential value, unless there is evidence which is obtained illegally. And I think Kenyans should also be concerned by the petition that was filed yesterday, because it also violates and or rather breaches the right of privacy in some of these communication companies we have in this country. How safe are we in this country if our call logs can be accessed by persons at will? So these are some of the questions that people need to ask some of these companies, and they also need to come out clear to clarify if at all they provided these logs, because in this country to get some of these details you need a court order, and no court order was obtained from courts. So as to
so you can only wonder how they got this information.
And it's really it opens a whole Pandora's box onto the legal implications of such a petition in itself. In fact,
I want Sarah to also help me out with that. So bearing in mind, of course, it is the constitutional right of any Kenyan who feels that a high-ranking official can be questioned if they have any allegations against them. But then some would ask, the evidence in those petitions, how did they get them? What impact could that have on the decision that the JSC will make, and if a tribunal is formed, on how the evidence was gathered? You know, doesn't that raise certain questions?
First of all, I would start with the issue of evidence. That is going to the merit of that particular case, and it is not on us to decide on merit of this particular case. The Judicial Service Commission is supposed to form a panel that will decide on these matters in terms of merit. And everyone who's speculating and giving their own legal opinions is giving them based on an opinion and not on fact. And since it has already been taken to the Judicial Service Commission for evaluation, I think it is important for Kenyans to let the full effects of the law take place. And secondly, when my learned counsel here is talking about the right to privacy, that is a limited right under the Constitution. It can be limited in cases of national interest, and the presidential nullifying of the vote is a case of national interest. I would only think that in this particular instance there would be need, in fact urgent need, to limit this right in order to get to the truth of this matter.
Okay. Boniface Akusala has also joined us here in studio. I believe I can now engage him on these discussions. Boniface, good morning. I want to begin by asking you your expectations, today's Supreme Court detailed judgment. What are you hoping to see from that court?
First of all,
and here as well.
Yes, the first thing that we expect from that court is justice to be now pronounced in detail. Now, before I further delve into that issue, I'd like to respond to one thing that I've heard this morning.
Okay.
On the limitation of rights. My learned friend Mr. Mwiti here has spoken about how can the right to privacy be infringed upon by telecommunication providers.
Yes.
My friend here is talking about limitation of rights. If you look at Article 24 of the Constitution, it outlines how rights can be limited. First of all, they can only be limited by law, and then in a way that is justifiable before an open and democratic society. It is not arbitrarily supposed to be infringed upon. Therefore, indeed, if this communication that is found in the said petitions is correct, then we have questions to be answered by our telecommunication providers. It raises serious constitutional issues. It raises serious legal issues.
That is, that is if they got them from those
exactly. If we are assuming.
Yes, we are assuming,
because this has been a season of rumor mongering. I've been in several situations where news have been brought that there is no foundation, there is no backup. You've seen affidavits that have been signed, letters have been signed by Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, apparently quitting the NASA coalition.
That's right.
Only to find out that it is not accurate. Therefore, the first premise, we are assuming that this information is false, and one of those rumor-mongering expeditions in the political divide. And again, it raises another question: how much rumor-mongering can we allow as a society? Because there is too much false information, false news, and some of which can have serious implications in our well-being and the societal balance. So that is what I would like to say in view of that information.
Okay, and you also briefly touched on my first question, which was your expectations about the detailed judgment today. I expect,
to be honest, very many petitions have been filed of late after that ruling on 1st September. And these petitions are relying on a well-reasoned judgment, the reasons being outlined by every one of them. You remember, last time I was with you, we spoke about every judge having their own judgment.
That's right.
And I am happy that this has happened. I hope that every judge will have their own judgment so that we have a rich jurisprudential
We all hope so.
Yes, we hope so. I'm positive we'll have every judge having their judgment, so that it is not a judge has been given a few sections to highlight, another one a few sections, because it does not bring that rich jurisprudential space that we so much desire that the 2013 judgment lacked.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And of course, those of you who are watching at home, talk to us, 22422. Let us know what are your thoughts, even as we await the detailed Supreme Court judgment from 10 in about, what, 3 hours or so? Actually, 4 hours. No, 3 rather. And that's when we expect that process to begin. Let me come back to you, Kimali. I want to find out from you, once the judgment is out, whichever way it will go, do you think the IEBC, as you know, in its current state, with a lot of infighting from what we have seen, will have enough time to read, ponder on the content, make changes in time for the October 17th poll?
I think we don't expect any much surprises from today's judgment.
Okay.
It will just be a detailed of whatever ruling was given on 1st September, because we already know that there were legalities that were committed by the IBC. There were irregularities that were committed by the IBC. So what we just expect from the court today is just the details of the such illegalities that were committed. So in essence, what we just expect is that the IBC will have will be compelled by the judgment. Now they will stop hiding their heads in the sand by just every time integrity issues arise, saying the Supreme Court judgment is not yet out. Yet they were told on 1st September that there were certain illegalities that were committed. So it was just upon them to go and find out, like you've seen Chebukati trying to do by evidence of the memos that have been leaked. And but today now it will provide a better standard, and it will. And I believe there is enough time, because if they are committed, if the IBC commissioners, the chairman, and the CEO, if they are committed to ensure that there is integrity in the IBC, I don't see any reason. But if they choose to engage in political sideshows like politicians, then we expect this stalemate to continue for a very long time. Okay,
thank you for that. And Sarah, same question to you. IBC will be keenly watching this detailed judgment. They've stated that once they receive it, they will make far-reaching reforms in line with what the judges recommend. Do you think they have enough time?
Time is probably not on their side. We can start with the instance that the servers will only be up earliest on the 26th. So of course we are expecting changes, and the same cannot be effected in this short period. Technically the timeline is quite tough for the IEBC to finally decide on everything, and 2, to be able to address every single irreducible minimum by Raila Amolo Odinga and the NASA team. And secondly, when the council here was talking about illegalities, I think we're taking it a bit too deep, because an illegality can be unintentionally committed by the same commission, depending on the timeline, depending on the nature of their work, and also depending on the kind of output that was allowed to the same commission. I will explain this using the IEBC case in the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal tied the hands of the IEBC by allowing them only to tally and announce the presidential results. Varying the results was not within their scope. So technically, the illegalities were bound to be committed, because there was very little the IEBC could do in this instance, except just announce the very results that were being given.
Although we've seen IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati thereafter raising many questions in memos showing that clearly he has more power to ask questions than simply just be the national returning officer. Wouldn't you say that he's shown that clearly he can do more than just announce results?
Yes, he can do more than just announce results, but it is quite funny that he only came out to talk about the very memos when he didn't mention this particular instance in the court proceedings. He was very confident with his system while going to court, and doubts the very system immediately after. It begs the question that did really Chebukati, was he not aware of these particular instances when they were happening? And why was he acting, and if he was not aware really, why was he acting in a manner to assume, to make us presume that everything happened behind his back, and yet the back stops with Chebukati as it is?
Okay. Let me read some of the feedback that people are sending us, talking to us on 22422. And Boniface, I'll also allow you to weigh in on what we've just talked about. Joel Omanga is saying, what we are seeing are attempts to water down the judgment. Is the Supreme Court only required to validate the election, but not to invalidate it? But someone else here is saying, Victor Bet from Kenya School of Law, now he's asking a question. Now the judiciary is independent simply because NASA was favored, according to him. What about the independence of the IEBC? Boniface, this is what some of our viewers think. I can also come over to you. Today's Supreme Court detailed judgment, very instrumental to how IEBC will proceed moving forward. Do they have time, capability to take into account some of the recommendations of the court? What is your take?
The time for IEBC does not start running today. It started running even before the election. It did not start running on 1st of September. IEBC is a constitutional organ created by the Constitution, and it is supposed to act in compliance with the court. What the court is telling IEBC to do is follow the law. So the IEBC is presumed to know the law. That is why it has very deep funding from the public resources to make sure that it invests in finding out what the law is and follow it. I read this morning that 28% of the per capita income, which translates to around 500 million, was given to IEBC, being the most highly funded organ right now to conduct the elections. Therefore, the standard for these elections was just not to be simply good. We needed credible, fair, transparent, and indeed elections that are in compliance with the law. But giving us an election that is just good enough was not what we subscribed to.
Okay.
That is the first thing. Secondly, we are looking at the issues that the court may have highlighted during the judgment. IEBC, as at that time, must have known where the Achilles heel is, must have known where the incompetencies are, and I believe that Mr. Chebukati may have been dishonest in the affidavit that was filed in court at that time.
Okay.
But he is trying to sanitize the process. He is trying to now do the right thing. In my opinion, better late than never. If he is doing the right thing, we the people should give him enough support. If he seemed to be again biased, or he seemed to be flouting the real law that made up his position, then it will call that this person be removed from office.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a need for homogeneous application. You see, an election is just not an event of people going to cast their vote. And I agree with what Chief Justice Maraga said. It is a process. Pre-election, during the voting, tallying and transmission. When one process is seemed to have a cancerous, tumor, the whole process is cancerous.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I want to read two quotes by the Chief Justice that he stated yesterday, and allow each of my panelists a chance to comment on them even as we wind up, because our time is almost up and Cheche will be happening almost immediately. Yesterday, the Chief Justice was quoted as saying, if you're tired of a strong and independent judiciary, and I want to start with you, Kimathi, then proceed to call a referendum to abolish it altogether. I'm sure you heard that. Secondly, he also stated that we are prepared to pay the ultimate price to protect the Constitution and the rule of law. I want to give you a chance now to comment on those two quotes by the Chief Justice yesterday.
What we saw from the Chief Justice yesterday was really someone who knows what he's doing in that particular position, and he knows the critical nature of his office and the independence of the judiciary. He demonstrated in very firm words, and he did not create any doubt in the Kenyan people that the judiciary will not be transparent, that the judiciary has he showed that the judiciary has the capacity to administer justice in an effective and accountable manner, and it gave a lot of hope to Kenyans that finally we have someone who can stand for what the law says and not what people want the law to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sarah, I'm sure you had a chance to listen to him yesterday.
Yes, but of course, I will start with a question. How independent is independent? Because what is the measuring rod for independence? If Chief Justice Maraga was actually as independent as he wants us to believe he is, why wasn't he questioning the same unequivocal or very vocal thoughts by NASA when they said they were not going to court? When they went and had their picketing in front of the same Supreme Court, it's only when the Jubilee supporters went ahead to have the same kind and the same nature of picketing in front of the Supreme Court that he went out and talked about it. And it is only after the Jubilee supporters had some valid claims that could be well investigated by the Judicial Service Commission that he decides to come out and talk about it. Secondly, is Justice Maraga entering into the political domain? Because as we are speaking about it, he complained about the Mathakarua barricading of the roads while she was going to listen to her own petition. And when he complained of the same, it begs the question, is the judiciary tied? Because they know the procedure themselves and they know the way they should have actually addressed this issue. By addressing it on a press conference, it was the wrong procedure altogether. They were supposed to actually have applied to the DPP maybe, or they should have actually raised the same claims with the Inspector General of Police at a very different venue and in very different circumstances. So when he comes out talking about issues and partially applying the law only when it is deemed that the Jubilee supporters are the ones who are finally raising their claims and raising their issues against the same judiciary, I think he has a duty to every single Kenyan. Every single Kenyan should believe that he is impartial. And when he's acting partially partial, because he is...
Is that how you feel he has been acting?
Yes, he's actually acting partially partial, because why hasn't he been addressing the NASA claims as it is? He did not...
There's a school of thought, and I want to pose this to you, that when the Jubilee side, which is government, speak, because of the stature of government being, the rulers of this land, that their word is almost much more potent than the word of the opposition, which, quote-unquote, may not hold as high a position in this country.
I would like to
so when the president speaks about a matter, it's not the same as you and I because of his position. How would you respond to that?
I would actually like to debunk that, because it is the very Supreme Court that nullified the presidential election. It made the president to be also within the powers of the law. It made the president lesser than the law as it is. So technically, coming out to state that the president is in a better position to execute
in a more high ranking.
Yes, in a better position to execute his opinions really as it is.
I think
is a misleading statement as it is, because Maraga should be applying the law impartially to both sides of the divide, and not listening to the claims by the Jubilee supporters is somewhat ignoring valid claims by valid Kenyans within this country.
Okay, was that you, Kimathi?
Yeah, I wanted to respond to the accusations she's leveled against Maraga, and saying that Maraga made the president within the law. Actually, it's not Maraga who made the president within the law. the rule of law and the constitution states that the law treats every person with equal status. So the constitution makes the president within the law. And to say that the Chief Justice did not talk about the demonstrations that were done by NASA, it begs me to ask which demonstrations. NASA actually never demonstrated outside the Supreme Court. When even NASA supporters were trying to hold their prayer vigils outside the Supreme Court during the hearings, we saw police barricade the roads and make sure there was nobody outside there. But what we saw yesterday, even Jubilee supporters were attempting to break into the Supreme Court premises, and we saw no action. That's why even the Chief Justice asked, what is the Inspector General's role in all this? Why was there no police trying to create law and order outside the Supreme Court? And the Chief Justice is not trying to be a politician, as some people are trying to allude to, because whatever he said yesterday was factual. The Chief Justice, even by trying to give an example of Mother Karua, how she was stopped to getting into court where her hearing was taking place, he was just trying to demonstrate to Kenyans and to Kenyans how far people are going into ensuring that they are violating the people's rights. And he was trying just
so you feel that he has been completely impartial, even though Jubilee supporters feel that in the run-up to the Supreme Court case, whereas at some point NASA had come out quite strongly saying the decision of Kenyans cannot be hinged on the decision of 7 people, he did not come out clearly in such a strong press conference to talk about that. But when Jubilee supporters go and campaign, or go and protest rather outside the Supreme Court, he then comes out, with a very serious sort of like press conference. How would don't you feel that to some extent Jubilee supporters feel that he only responds when one thing happens but doesn't respond when something else happens?
I think it's good to appreciate that this is not the first time the Chief Justice has condemned attacks on the judiciary. He also did so before, in the run-up to the August 8 elections, when there was a case in Court of Appeal on the matter to do with the procurement of electoral materials by the IBC, the Al Ghurair case. So that's a time where we saw even the president and the deputy president level so much allegations on the integrity of the court. And at that time, the Chief Justice even issued a statement to say that the judiciary is not partisan, and that ensuring that justice will be done. So even yesterday, from his statements, he was very clear in his initial statements when he was in his opening remarks, when he said that he's been very silent all along. It's good to know that since the elections were conducted, the Chief Justice has never condemned any attacks on the judiciary. Yesterday was the first time he did so. And to say that he only condemned such attacks when when Jubilee supporters are coming out, I think it's plainly dishonest, because what we might want to say is that there is no political divide which has attacked the judiciary more than the Jubilee side. And Maraga responding to such grievous attacks, I think it's only fair, and he did not get specifically to who is attacking the judiciary. So he did not mention names. Let me allow so the guilty are afraid. Boniface. Okay, let me allow Boniface to come in. Boniface, I'm sure you have a lot to comment.
Trust me, there is a lot to comment. First of all, the issue of the demonstrators of Jubilee evoking the response from the Chief Justice. Nothing is further from the truth. The Chief Justice and the Judicial, actually it's not the Chief Justice, the Judicial Service Commission was responding to what the other arms of government have been leveling against the judiciary. It is not the supporters can demonstrate, they can carry leaves and light bonfires in the middle of the streets for all we care. But when another arm of government decides to attack another arm of government, now that raises another issue apart from just the politicking of the society. Now, there are 3 arms of government: the judiciary, executive, and the legislature. Each arm must be independent and away from directions from the other arm. for purposes of bringing checks and balances, not just to the government but to the people. Now, French jurist Montesquieu stated that when the legislature and the executive are conjoined, it brings about tyranny. When the executive and the judiciary are conjoined, it brings about oppression. We have seen tyranny. Members of parliament passing bills that fall below the levels required of Kenya because of that conjoinment between the executive and the legislature. We also are fearing that if the judiciary allowed itself to go in bed with the executive, then the end product would be an oppressive society. Now, when Chief Justice Maraga, together with the Judicial Service Commission, protect the integrity and independence of the judiciary, it is trying to block, to barricade that highway towards anarchy and oppression. And any sober-minded Kenyan needs to stand up and support the independence of the judiciary, because right now the executive and the legislature are in bed with each other. That we can say without fear of contradiction. Number two, it has been stated that the executive right now has tyranny of numbers in the legislature. You heard the president speaking about we shall impeach after 2 or 3 months. You heard him say we have the numbers to pass any agenda we want. That is not what the law envisaged. We needed institutions that are independent. The legislature to do its work, the executive to do its work, and the judiciary to do its work. Now, the reason why the judiciary is act at this moment is because the executive and the legislature are up in arms against the judiciary, because the judiciary is doing its work independently. Look at Senator Murkomen, for example, and I have to be honest, we will come back and revisit this issue of Mr. Murkomen attacking.
Spoken very similar to, we've had that quote quite a bit in the last couple of days.
Trust me, we will revisit this, because as an officer of the Supreme Court, he has an obligation higher than any other employer to the Supreme Court, to the rule of law, to the Constitution, and he knows what the Constitution is. Well,
higher than the position of his political party.
Higher than the position of his political party, or even his own employer, who happens to be the legislature, the Senate. So the first obligation for any lawyer is fidelity to the law, fidelity to the Constitution. When my learned friend here is talking about the CJ, the Jubilee, and etc., she is being dishonest, because the truth is there is higher fidelity to the law that is required from all of us. There is that bare minimum, that which you cannot deny.
Okay.
As lawyers we say, do not deny the obvious. There is that obvious that has been brought about.
Okay.
Let me just address one little issue.
Because my time is up. You've called Sarah dishonest. I need to give her 30 seconds to respond before we wind up. Sarah, 30 seconds, please.
30 seconds to respond. Thank you, Waigwa. First of all, I will start with the issue of impartially applying the law. We partially apply the law when it fits us. I will say this because Orengo came out very strongly as senior counsel. He came out very strongly and said that the court was not an option. The Law Society of Kenya, the Judicial Service Commission, and every other legal body in the country did not come out and question why he said that, and did not question his credibility as an advocate of the court and his responsibility to the court as it is. And when other members of the judiciary come out and make similar statements questioning the nature of the conversations questioning the nature and the impartiality of the Judicial Service Commission as it is, because Waigwa, I will repeat again, all the Judicial Service Commission had to do was to listen to this application by Kenyans, to listen to it on merit and throw it out if it lacked any merit. Coming out strongly and condemning such attacks as instigated from the executive does not really make sense in this instance, and it only goes to show that the judiciary is not as impartial as it wants us to believe it is.
Okay, I'll have to cut you off there because our time truly is up. Thank you so much to each of my guests for finding time to be here with us. The time was clearly too short. We'll need to find more time next time to allow each of my guests to bring us up to date in terms of also just the legalities around the state that we are in. Let me read 2 quick SMSs even as I wind up. Someone here says, what if that judgment changes most of what the judges agree on and they disagree on few of the matters? They don't. How will it go? Okay, someone feeling like, what if there are surprises within the judgment? And one other person, Nixon Dugire from Kindaruma, It's very unfortunate that the habit of jumping before the drumbeat has taken lead on us. Very impatient generation. And the last one here, you don't give us your name or where you're writing from, but you say the full judgment is not going to have anything new. It will just detail what was said on the first. Kenyans have been misled to believe that there will be something new. That is how we wind up this discussion right now. Clearly, lots of talking points around this with different opinions, but you just have to wait until 10 o'clock to see what the Supreme Court will deliver in terms of a comprehensive judgment, and after that, see the way forward. My name is Wahiga Mwaura. Cheche, up next on the other side of this break. You're watching the Power Breakfast Show live on Citizen TV.